"Ma'am, it's not going through," the cashier whispered, eyes cutting to the line behind Marissa Reed. Marissa forced a smile and pressed a palm to her belly, 8 months pregnant, swollen feet in cheap flats. The baby rolled hard, impatient with the fluorescent hum and the strangers pretending not to listen. "It must be the chip," she lied, swiping again. Declined. The cashier's face went pink. A man behind Marissa huffed. Marissa paid with the last 20 in her wallet, carried 2 half-filled bags to her minivan, and stared at her wedding ring like it belonged to someone else. She called the bank. A cheerful robot voice answered with numbers that didn't make sense. Checking, $0. Savings, $0. Joint investments, $0. Her mouth went dry. She dialed her husband. Ethan answered on the 3rd try. Music thumped. Someone laughed close to him, warm, female, not a meeting. "Ethan," Marissa said, keeping her voice even, "the accounts are empty, all of them." A pause. Then he said, calm and cruel, "That's the point." Marissa gripped the steering wheel until her fingers ached. "I couldn't buy milk. I'm carrying your child." "You'll be fine," he replied, the way he used to soothe angry clients. "Don't call me again unless it's an emergency." The line went dead. She drove to his office anyway. The receptionist wouldn't look up when Marissa asked for him. After a long silence, she whispered, "He left with Paige Hart." By the time Marissa got home, a courier envelope was taped to the door. Petition for dissolution, filed at 9:08 a, while she'd been at her prenatal appointment, texting Ethan a sonogram and a heart emoji. A yellow sticky note sat on top in his sharp handwriting. Sign, don't embarrass yourself. Her phone buzzed. Ethan's Instagram story loaded. Champagne flutes, a rooftop skyline, Paige's manicured hand on his sleeve. Caption, new life. Marissa swallowed bile and opened her banking app again. A fresh alert flashed across the screen. New device login, followed by a transfer confirmation to Larkspur Holdings LLC. She took a screenshot. Then another notification popped up, quieter but heavier. A missed call and voicemail from an unknown number. "Mrs. Reed, this is the Whitmore family office. Your father asked us to locate you tonight." Marissa Reed had spent 15 years in other people's emergencies. She could start an IV in the dark, calm a panicking father with one hand on his shoulder, and whisper, "Breathe with me," until the room stopped spinning. For them. For herself, she sat on her kitchen tile with a courier envelope in her lap and couldn't make her lungs work. Her scrubs were still on, speckled with hand sanitizer. Her name badge, Marissa RN, hung crooked at her chest. Ethan used to tease her that she brought the whole hospital home. Tonight, home felt like a set after the actors left. On the fridge, their latest ultrasound was held up by a magnet shaped like a lighthouse. Under it, a handwritten list: diapers, wipes, vitamin D drops. She'd written it last week, believing grocery runs were a problem you solved with a coupon, not a divorce petition. Marissa replayed the voicemail from the unknown number. "Whitmore family office." The words landed like a stone. She hadn't used her father's name since she'd married Ethan, not because she was ashamed, because she wanted something clean, love without leverage. She wiped her face, stood, and did what she always did when life got loud. She looked for the next task. She scanned the papers, circled the hearing date, then opened her laptop and emailed the screenshot of the new device login alert to herself twice, personal inbox, and a new account Ethan didn't know existed. At 5:30 a.m., she drove to St. Bridget Community Clinic for her shift. She stopped on the way to drop soup at Mrs. Donnelly's porch, the widowed neighbor who couldn't stand long enough to cook. Small kindnesses were how Marissa measured a day. Inside the clinic, she smiled at patients like nothing had happened. Mr. Alvarez squeezed her hand after his blood draw. "You're a blessing, Nurse Reed," he said. She swallowed hard and kept moving. On her break, she tried the bank again. Still zeros. She tried Ethan again. Straight to voicemail. The baby kicked, sharp and impatient, like it didn't accept silence as an answer. Marissa opened the employee benefits portal to print her prenatal coverage letter for the hospital tour. The screen refreshed once, then flashed, "Health insurance terminated, effective yesterday." Marissa sat in her car outside St. Bridget, hands shaking around her phone. The benefits portal message kept burning in her mind, terminated, effective yesterday. She called her OB's office. The receptionist recognized her name and lowered her voice. "Honey, the hospital wants a $2,000 deposit if you don't have active insurance." $2,000? Larissa stared at her dashboard where the gas light blinked. "I'm a nurse." "I'm sorry, I don't make the rules." Larissa ended the call and opened the glove box. Inside were coupons, a spare pacifier she'd bought on impulse, and a stack of medical bills tied with a rubber band. Her mother's rehab invoices. 6 months ago, Lena Reed had suffered a stroke in Ohio. Marissa had taken every overtime shift she could, sent money, and promised her mother, "I won't let them push you out." The auto-pay for Lena's facility came out of the joint account Ethan managed. Marissa had never questioned it. Ethan liked being the organized one. He said spreadsheets calmed him. He also said her job was to focus on the baby and let him handle finances. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Ethan. Sunridge Rehab Center. Payment failed. A second message followed, colder. Please contact billing. Discharge review Friday 10 a.m. Marissa's throat tightened. If they discharged her mother early, Lena would go home alone to a house with stairs, no railings, no one to lift her. Marissa pictured her mother's left hand curled tight, stubbornly refusing to open. She pictured the last video call, Lena trying to smile with half her mouth, whispering, "Don't you worry about me, baby." Marissa pressed her forehead to the steering wheel. She couldn't leave Boston. She couldn't disappear. She couldn't even scream without risking her blood pressure and the baby. She called the Whitmore family office number back. It rang once, then went to an assistant. "Mrs. Reed, we can arrange a meeting," the woman said carefully, as if reading from a script. I need time," Marissa whispered, hating how small she sounded. When she got home that night, a new envelope sat under the doormat, certified mail. Her name was spelled perfectly. Ethan's lawyer had learned her middle initial. She signed for it with a pen that barely worked. Inside was one page. Notice of eviction hearing, requested by Ethan Reed. The date was circled in red, next Wednesday, and stapled to the back was a hospital form listing her delivery as self-pay, no coverage. Marissa didn't sleep. At dawn, she spread the eviction notice, the insurance cancellation, and the clinic schedule across the kitchen table like triage charts. One date glared at her from Ethan's calendar app, still shared on her phone. Thursday night, the Redwood Foundation Gala, Harborlight Hotel. Ethan's firm sponsored it every year. Marissa had volunteered at the silent auction, smiling beside him while donors praised his integrity. This year he was receiving a Community Leadership Award, the kind that came with a speech, a spotlight, and a camera crew hired to stream the event to the firm's clients. She should stay home, conserve strength, protect the baby. But a gala meant HR, board members and witnesses, people who could confirm who Ethan was in public versus in private. It also meant the firm's benefits director, Claire Haskins, the woman Marissa had emailed twice with no reply about the insurance termination. By late afternoon, Marissa pulled her only navy maternity dress from the closet and pinned her wedding ring onto a thin chain under her collar, hidden but close. She needed cash for parking, so she emptied a jar of loose change and counted quarters with shaking hands. Ruth, the clinic receptionist, had slipped her $100 bill at lunch and said, "Pay me back when you can, just get there." The Harbor Lights ballroom smelled like roses and expensive cologne. Crystal chandeliers threw warm light over cold faces. At the entrance, a sign read, "Event recorded, security cameras in use." Above it, a black dome camera blinked, steady as a heartbeat. Marissa kept her posture straight and moved through tuxedos and gowns, past a stage with a silver microphone and a giant screen looping Ethan's headshot beside words like honor and service. She spotted Claire Haskins near the bar, clipboard in hand. Marissa started toward her, hope rising like a small flame. Then the room shifted. People turned. A ripple of laughter rolled from the doors. Ethan walked in, but not as her husband. His suit was sharper, his smile wider, his hand wrapped around Paige Hart's waist. Paige in a white satin dress. Paige wearing a sparkling ring that was not subtle. Paige leaning in to whisper something that made Ethan grin. Marissa's stomach dropped as the MC tapped the mic and said, "Let's welcome Mr. Reed and his special guest." And Ethan looked straight at Marissa, like he'd been waiting to see if she dared show up. Ethan Reed squeezed Paige Hart's waist as they crossed the ballroom, smiling the way he did in court, slow, certain, practiced. He'd seen Marissa the second she stepped inside. Navy dress, tired eyes, belly high and heavy. Good. Let her feel small before she begged. Paige tilted her head. "Is that her?" "My wife," Ethan said, as if the word tasted old. "For now." Paige's father, Victor Hart, sat at the head table with 2 board members from the Redwood Foundation. Ethan needed Victor's vote on Monday. Partnership tracks were brutal, and Ethan was tired of being the reliable workhorse who never got the title. Marrying into the Hart orbit was a shortcut, one he'd earned, he told himself, by refusing to stay ordinary. He guided Paige toward the bar, keeping his back to Marissa. "Tonight is optics," he murmured. "Smile, let them photograph us, let them connect the dots. The rest is paperwork." "Paperwork like divorce?" Paige's lips curved. Ethan's phone buzzed. Claire Haskins. Benefits updated. He didn't reply. 2 clicks had been all it took to drop Marissa from his plan, the same way you remove a dependent from an account. She'd been grateful when he offered to handle everything. Grateful people didn't ask questions. He still carried her debit card in his wallet, cancelled the backup, and told the bank she'd misplaced it again. Months ago, when she mentioned her mom's rehab bills, Ethan had nodded and said, "I've got it." Then he created Larkspur Holdings, LLC, opened a new account, and started routing transfers under descriptions Marissa would never understand. He wasn't stealing, he rationalized. He was reallocating resources away from chaos. He spotted his associate, Miles Ketter, near the stage with a slim folder. Miles lifted his brows in silent confirmation. Ethan leaned close to Paige. "After the award, I'll make an announcement. Clean, quick, no drama." Paige's laugh was soft. "Public?" "It protects me," Ethan said. "If she cries, people assume guilt. If she argues, she looks unstable. Either way, the board sees I'm decisive." Across the room, Marissa had stopped walking. She was staring at the giant screen where Ethan's achievements looped like a sermon. Ethan watched her fingers twist at her necklace, and he felt the old irritation rise. Her stubborn dignity even broke. He lifted his glass toward her, a toast that wasn't kind. Then Ethan signaled Miles, and the folder meant for Marissa started moving toward the microphone. Paige Hart didn't just look expensive, she moved like the room belonged to her. As Ethan led her past the photo wall, donors angled their bodies toward her as if she carried gravity. Marissa recognized the name, Hart Development, the company that built half the waterfront. Victor Hart was the Redwood Foundation's biggest check, and Paige was his public jewel. Marissa stood near a pillar, fingers tight around a glass of water she hadn't touched. The baby shifted low, a heavy reminder she couldn't run. Her eyes tracked Ethan's hand on Paige's waist, the same hand that used to rest on Marissa's back at church, guiding her through Sunday smiles. Paige's gaze landed on Marissa and held it, cool and assessing. She whispered something to Ethan. He laughed, and the laugh carried, just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Paige drifted closer, heels clicking, and stopped an arm's length from Marissa. "So you are the famous Marissa," she said, voice sweet as frosting. "Ethan talks about you like you're a chapter he outgrew." Marissa's cheeks burned. "I'm his wife." Paige's smile didn't change. "Not for long. Victor hates mess. The board hates mess.
And the firm?
She tipped her head toward the stage where the microphone waited. They love a clean story. Marissa swallowed. Why are you doing this? Paige's eyes flicked to Marissa's belly. Because I don't share. Then softer, almost bored, and because Ethan finally chose power over pity. She lifted her left hand, letting the diamond catch the chandelier light. Victor likes winners, she added. Over Ethan's shoulder, Paige nodded once at the event coordinator, and the velvet rope at the side door quietly shifted, blocking the nearest exit. Behind Paige, Victor Hart rose from the head table and clasped Ethan's shoulder like a father blessing a son. Cameras flashed. A videographer adjusted focus on the couple, framing them beneath the event banner. Honor, service, family. Claire Haskins passed by with her clipboard.
Marissa reached out.
Claire, my insurance. Claire's face tightened for a fraction of a second, then she glanced at Ethan as if asking permission. We'll discuss it on Monday, she said, and kept walking. Ethan stepped in beside Paige. Don't make a scene, he murmured to Marissa without looking at her. You're already costing me enough. Marissa's throat closed. She looked up at the blinking dome camera over the bar and forced herself to breathe. Miles Ketter climbed the stage, opened the folder, and said into the microphone, Mrs. Reed, please come forward. Marissa's knees felt loose as she crossed the ballroom. Conversations thinned into a hush that followed her like a shadow. She kept one hand under her belly, not for show, but because the baby seemed to sense the eyes and pressed hard against her ribs. On stage, Miles Ketter stood beside the silver microphone, the folder open like a verdict. Mrs. Reed, he repeated, smiling as if he were calling a raffle winner. Right here, please. Ethan didn't move to help. He stayed at Victor Hart's table with Paige, chin lifted, enjoying the slow walk. Marissa climbed the 2 steps. The lights warmed her face. The room beyond turned into a dark sea of silhouettes. She could see the red recording light on the videographer's camera, and above the bar, the dome security camera blinking. Miles lowered his voice. Just sign. It's easier. What is it? Marissa asked. Miles angled the papers so the audience could glimpse headings and seal stamps. A simple acknowledgement. You've been informed of the dissolution filing, and you're vacating the marital residence. It prevents misunderstandings. Marissa's mouth went dry. You mailed me an eviction hearing. Miles chuckled into the microphone. Mrs. Reed is emotional tonight. We'll keep this brief. Laughter fluttered from somewhere near the back. Ethan stepped forward at last, taking the mic from Miles with a confident grip. Everyone, thank you for being here, he began, voice smooth. I want to address an unfortunate situation before rumors start. He turned to Marissa, eyes flat. Marissa, you've taken a lot from me over the years. Time, energy, money. I supported you, I supported your mother, and it still wasn't enough. A few donors nodded, the way people do when they want a neat story. Marissa felt heat crawl up her neck. My mother had a stroke, she said. You agreed. Ethan's smile sharpened. There, that tone. This is why we're done. He lifted the paper. Sign it. Show some gratitude. Don't turn my award night into your melodrama. Paige's laugh rang out, bright and approving. Marissa looked down at the signature line. Her name was typed perfectly. The pen Miles offered trembled in his hand, as if even it disliked the task. Behind the stage curtain, 2 staffers whispered, thinking the mic couldn't catch it. Did you confirm the transfer to Larkspur cleared? One said. Yeah, the other replied. He said the nurse won't know until Monday. Marissa lifted her head, staring past Ethan, because she finally understood the trap had a timetable. Marissa didn't sign. Not yet. She took the pen Miles offered and held it like it was contaminated. Ethan kept the microphone in one hand, smiling at the crowd as if this was a charity raffle. Just a formality, he said, so we can all move on. Marissa glanced at the signature line again. The paper had her full name, her maiden name in parentheses, her due date typed under dependent. Someone had even included the clinic's address. It wasn't paperwork, it was a leash. I need water, she said. Miles leaned in, teeth still smiling. You step off this stage without signing, and he'll say you refused a reasonable request. Ethan's eyes warned her, behave. Marissa nodded like she agreed, then turned toward the stairs. Her shoes shook on the first step, but she didn't stumble. She walked past the photo wall, straight to the hallway beside the ballroom, where the noise dulled and the carpet swallowed sound. Her phone was already in her hand. She opened the banking app and pulled up the alert she'd screenshotted, new device login. Then the transfer confirmation to Larkspur Holdings, LLC. She added a note, 7:12 p.m., Gala Night, Harbour Light Hotel. She emailed it again to the secret account she'd created, then to a print shop's email address she found in her contacts. Anything that would leave a trail outside Ethan's control. At the corner, a metal placard caught her eye. Security office. Cameras recorded 24/7. Beneath it, another sign. Event live stream in progress. The dome camera above the doorway blinked, unbothered. Marissa raised her phone and snapped a photo of the signs, the camera, and the timestamp on the nearby digital clock. Evidence didn't have to be dramatic. It just had to be real. A door opened behind her. A tall man with grey hair and a hotel badge stepped out, scanning the corridor. His name tag read, Dorsey, Security Supervisor. He saw her belly, the pen in her hand, the papers clutched against her chest. His expression hardened in the way men get when they've seen too many bullies. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "are you being pressured to sign something?" Marissa's throat tightened. She couldn't afford to trust strangers, but she couldn't afford not to either. She showed him the eviction notice and the divorce filing date. Dorsey read one line, then looked up. "Stage, bar, side hall, 3 angles," he said, time-stamped, "and the stream is archived." Marissa's heart kicked like the baby inside her. "Can you keep it?" Dorsey slid a business card into her palm. "Say the word, and I'll lock tonight's footage before anyone can delete it." Marissa returned to the ballroom with Dorsey's card hidden in her palm. The music had restarted, but the air felt tight, like everyone was waiting for the next punch. Ethan intercepted her before she reached her seat. He guided her toward a service corridor, smile fixed for cameras. "You talked to security," he said softly. "I needed a moment." "You needed permission." He produced her phone case from his pocket. Her spare credit card slot was empty. "I disabled the last card. Don't try that again." Marissa's stomach flipped. "How did you—" "Miles," Ethan said, nodding toward the stage. "He'll read the statement. You'll sign. Then you'll leave quietly." "I'm not leaving," Marissa said. "I have nowhere to go. My insurance—" Ethan's eyes glinted. "Exactly. I called your clinic's administrator an hour ago. If you keep defaming me in public, they'll open an investigation for misconduct. Nurses don't work long with an investigation hanging." "That's a lie. Watch me make it true." He slid his phone toward her. On the screen was an email draft addressed to Sunridge Rehab Billing. Subject: Payment plan cancelled. Beneath it, a line: Discharge approved. Marissa felt her knees weaken. "My mother can't—" "She can," Ethan said. "Somewhere else. Not my problem." The ballroom doors swung open and Paige appeared, lipstick perfect, eyes bored. 2 hotel staffers stood behind her, hands clasped. Paige pointed toward the exit rope. "She's not to leave the property," she murmured, loud enough for Marissa to hear. "Victor requested it." Marissa looked for Dorsey. He was across the hall, speaking into a radio, eyes flicking toward her with warning. She tried to step toward him, but one staffer moved, blocking her path like a wall. Ethan leaned closer. "You want to protect the baby? Then stop fighting." He pressed a pen into her fingers. "Sign, and I'll reactivate insurance for 30 days. Just long enough for delivery." Marissa's throat burned. 30 days sounded like mercy. It was a cage. She tasted metal, realized her badge was in her purse, her license number on every form. One report could end her career before her child even breathed. Ethan straightened, raised his voice. "There you are," he called, guiding her back toward the stage. "Let's finish this." As the spotlight found them, Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope stamped with an official crest. "If you refuse, this goes to the Board of Nursing tonight." The MC's smile faltered as Ethan reclaimed the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I apologize. Tonight was meant to celebrate service. Unfortunately, I have to protect my name." He placed the sealed envelope on the lectern and broke it open for everyone to see. Inside was a thick packet with a state seal on the first page. He held it up to the camera. On the giant screen, the title magnified, "Complaint, Board of Nursing." Marissa's breath caught. The room murmured. Ethan turned to her, voice still smooth. "Marissa has been under investigation at her clinic. Missing medication counts, patient complaints, unstable behavior." He tapped the packet. "I was advised to remove her from my insurance and separate finances immediately." "That's not true," Marissa said, but her words sounded small under the speakers. Paige leaned into Victor Hart's ear, smiling. Victor nodded, satisfied. This was the clean story he wanted. Ethan continued. "For months, I paid for her mother's rehab, her debts, her choices." He paused, letting the word choices land like dirt on her face. "And in return, she has threatened to ruin my career if I don't keep funding her." Gasps. A few women in pearls glanced at Marissa's belly with pity that felt like judgment. Marissa looked down and saw her wedding ring still hanging on the chain under her collar. 6 years ago at St. Luke's Church, Ethan had promised, "I will never leave you without shelter." The memory slammed into her ribs harder than the baby's kick. Ethan lifted a second page, already signed by Miles as witness. "I offered a settlement," he said. 30 days of coverage so she can deliver safely. If she signs tonight and agrees to vacate our home." He pressed the pen toward her again, right into the spotlight. The live stream camera zoomed in. On screen, her shaking hand looked enormous. "You're doing this on camera," Marissa whispered. "I'm doing this so the truth is recorded," Ethan replied, then lowered his voice only she could hear. "Refuse, and I send it at midnight." Marissa's eyes flashed to the security dome over the bar. Blink, blink, blink. She raised her chin. "If you wanted the truth recorded," she said louder now, "you picked the right room." A hush snapped tight. From the back row, a chair scraped. A grey-haired man in a security jacket stood, holding up a small black drive like a badge. "Mr. Reed?" Dorsey called. "The cameras recorded something you won't like." Marissa froze under the spotlight, while the room digested Dorsey's shout. Phones lifted. The live stream chat scrolled on the giant screen like falling snow. Ethan's smile twitched, then snapped back into place. "Security is mistaken," he said, voice smooth. "This is a private matter. Please, enjoy the evening." But Dorsey was already moving down the center aisle, his jacket unzipped, the small black drive pinched between 2 fingers. He didn't look at Ethan first. He looked at the donors, the board members, the videographer. "Ma'am asked me to preserve footage," he said. "I did." A hiss of whispers spread. Some faces softened with sympathy. Others sharpened with suspicion, the way people judge a woman before they ask what was done to her. A woman in pearls leaned toward her husband and murmured, "If she's lying, she's desperate." Another guest muttered, "Poor Ethan." The words hit Marissa like spit. Paige's eyes met Marissa's from across the room, cold, victorious. Victor Hart tapped the table once, impatient. Claire Haskins stared at her clipboard like it might save her from choosing a side. Ethan stepped closer to Marissa, lowering his voice. "You just burned your last bridge," he whispered. "They'll think you staged it." Marissa tried to answer, but her throat wouldn't cooperate. The baby pressed low, heavy as an anchor. The ballroom felt farther away than a hospital corridor in a code blue. The MC cleared his throat and forced a laugh. "Well, technology, always keeping us honest." A few guests chuckled too loudly. Others looked away, embarrassed to be present. 2 staffers approached Marissa from the side, not touching her, but steering her with their bodies. "Ma'am, maybe you should take a break," one said, as if she were the problem to be managed. Marissa stepped off the stage and reached for her purse strap. Nothing. Her purse was gone. So was her clinic badge, her car keys, and the envelope with her mother's rehab notices, the only proof she had left of the discharge threat. Panic flashed hot behind her eyes. She scanned the crowd, searching the floor, the chairs, the bar. Paige lifted a black leather purse from beside her chair and handed it to Victor, like it was trash. Marissa lunged, but the staffers blocked her again, and Dorsey's radio crackled. "Supervisor, someone just requested access to the camera archive, using Mr. Reed's name." Marissa slipped through a door marked Employees Only and found a narrow service stairwell that smelled like bleach and hot wiring. The music from the ballroom became a dull thump above her head. She sank onto the bottom step, one hand braced on the railing, the other spread over her belly. Her breath came in short, angry pulls. She'd faced gunshot wounds, cardiac arrests, parents screaming in hallways. None of that had prepared her for a room full of strangers deciding she deserved to be ruined. She reached under her collar and drew out the chain with her wedding ring. The gold circle swung like a tiny shackle. Ethan had placed it on her finger in front of a pastor and both families, promising shelter and honor. Tonight he'd tried to turn her into a cautionary tale on camera. A sob broke free before she could stop it. Then another. She covered her mouth so the sound wouldn't echo up the stairwell, but tears still spilled hot and humiliating. For 1 minute, she let herself be human, scared, broke, alone, pregnant, locked out of her own life. Then she wiped her cheeks with the heel of her hand and stared at the Dorsey business card hidden in her palm. Evidence, timestamps, 3 angles, a live stream archive. Marissa opened her phone and typed with trembling thumbs. "Dorsey, this is Marissa Reed. Please lock tonight's footage now. All cameras, stage, bar, hallway. Do not release it to anyone without my written consent." She hit send, then took a screenshot of the sent message, because she had learned a new kind of medicine tonight, the kind you document for court. Her stomach tightened again, lower this time, and she breathed through it, like a contraction. Not labor, she told herself. Stress. You cannot go into labor in a hotel stairwell. She tried to call Blythe, but her screen flashed low battery, 5%. She tried to call the valet desk to retrieve her car without keys, but the call failed. Everything depended on something she didn't have: money, proof, power, a spare set. Marissa pressed her forehead to the cool metal rail and spoke the words she'd been swallowing for years. "I'm done begging." Upstairs, applause erupted, Ethan accepting his award as if nothing had happened. Her phone vibrated once, then twice. A new text arrived from a number she didn't recognize. "I saw Paige take your purse, and I already pulled the archive stream. Meet me by the security office in 5 minutes." Marissa found the security office tucked behind the ballroom, a plain door beside the loading dock. Dorsey opened it before she knocked, as if he'd been watching the monitor for her. Inside, the glow of screens showed the gala from 3 angles: Ethan at the lectern, Paige laughing, Marissa on stage with a pen in her shaking hand. "You're safe here," Dorsey said. "But they're trying to pull the archive. I blocked the request." "Thank you," Marissa whispered. "My purse, my keys." A woman stepped out from the back room, blazer over an evening dress, hair pinned tight. Claire Haskins. The clipboard was gone. In her hands was Marissa's black purse, strap cut clean. "I'm sorry," Claire said, voice low. "Paige ordered staff to confiscate it. She said you were unstable and might hurt someone." Marissa grabbed the purse. Her badge was missing. So were her car keys and the envelope from Sunridge. Only her phone remained, dying at 2%. "My clinic will think I abandoned my shift tomorrow," Marissa said. "They already got a call," Claire admitted. "An anonymous complaint hit the hotline during Ethan's speech. Your administrator just placed you on immediate leave pending review." The floor seemed to tilt. Leave meant no pay. No pay meant no deposit. No deposit meant no delivery. Marissa's phone rang, and for once the caller ID was familiar. Sunridge Rehab Billing. She answered and heard a man say, "Mrs. Reed, if we don't receive payment by noon tomorrow, your mother's discharge will proceed." Marissa's knees buckled. She caught herself on the desk, staring at the monitors like they could become a different reality. Claire slid a folded printout toward her. Benefits change log, Ethan's user ID, a timestamp from yesterday, a note, terminate coverage, spouse. "He did it," Marissa breathed. Claire's eyes flashed with something like shame. I also have the email he sent me, she said. He wrote, "Cut her off, tonight." I kept it. Outside, a valet radio squawked. Dorsey glanced at another screen. "They booted your minivan," he said quietly. "Heart Security requested it." Marissa pressed both hands to her belly. She had never felt so homeless while still standing upright. Claire took a breath, decision hardening in her face. "Marissa," she said, "I'm done staying neutral. I saw everything and I'm taking you to a lawyer tonight." Claire drove Marissa out of the Harbour Light garage in her own sedan, ignoring the valet who tried to wave them down. Rain streaked the windshield, turning the city lights into smeared gold. Marissa held her belly with one hand and Dorsey's card with the other, as if the paper could keep her upright. Her feet were swollen, but she forced herself to stay alert. "You're sure about this?" Marissa asked. "If Victor Hart finds out you helped me—" "Victor Hart can write checks," Claire said, jaw set. "He doesn't get to rewrite the truth." They stopped at a brick building 2 blocks from the courthouse. A modest plaque by the buzzer read, "Keats and Langley, Family Law." No marble, no chandelier, just a warm lamp in the window and a security camera above the door. Inside, a tall woman with silver hair and reading glasses looked up from a stack of files. "Claire," she said, voice steady. "This is her?" Marissa swallowed. "Marissa Reed." "I'm Diane Keats," the woman replied, extending a hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes direct, the kind of eyes that had heard every excuse and never confused charm with innocence. "Former ADA, 20 years in domestic and financial abuse cases. Sit." Marissa sat, knees aching. Claire placed the benefits change log, Ethan's email, and the cut purse strap on the desk like exhibit labels. Dorsey's number was already on speaker. He confirmed the archive was locked, time-stamped, and backed up. Diane flipped through the paperwork without flinching. "He emptied joint accounts, cancelled insurance, threatened your license, and tried to force a signature in public," she said. "That's coercion, potential fraud, and the Board of Nursing packet, if it's false, that's defamation." Marissa's voice cracked. "He can take my job, my mother's rehab, my delivery deposit." Diane slid a legal pad toward her. "We move tonight," she said. "Emergency motion to freeze assets. Motion for exclusive use of the home. Order to reinstate insurance pending hearing. And we notify your clinic that a complaint was used as leverage." Claire leaned forward. "Can we stop the rehab discharge?" "We can," Diane said. "But I need one thing. Every name, every date, every transfer you remember." Marissa took a breath, steadied herself and began. Diane listened, pen moving fast. Then Diane's phone buzzed. She read one line and her face tightened. "Ethan filed for temporary custody tonight, and he claims you're a danger to the baby." Diane Keats worked like an ER doctor, fast, calm, ruthless with details. She spread Marissa's documents across her conference table and labeled them with sticky notes. Insurance, eviction, rehab, nursing board, transfer. "First," Diane said, "we neutralize the custody lie." She called Marissa's OB on speaker. Dr. Saito confirmed Marissa's prenatal chart showed normal vitals, no substance issues, no psychiatric flags. Diane requested a written letter and the clinic's appointment logs. "That alone undercuts danger," she said. "Second, we prove coercion." Dorsey emailed a secure link. The video showed Ethan steering Marissa into the service corridor, pen shoved into her hand, his mouth forming the words, "Sign, and I'll reactivate insurance for 30 days. Another angle caught Paige directing staff to block the side door. Timestamp, camera ID, audio from the live stream mic, bleeding into the hall. Diane clipped the segments, saved them to 3 drives, and handed one to Claire. "Chain of custody," she warned. "No one loses this." Third, we follow the money. Claire logged into the benefits portal as admin and pulled the audit trail. Ethan's user ID, the exact minute he terminated coverage, and a note attached, per counsel. She forwarded Ethan's email, "Cut her off. Tonight." Diane printed it, highlighted the header metadata, and slid it into a file folder marked Exhibit A. Marissa watched, stunned. He can still erase accounts, she said. He can't erase banks, Diane replied. She drafted subpoenas for account statements, the Larkspur Holdings LLC opening documents, and any transfers over $5,000 in the last 18 months. She pulled public records showing Larkspur was registered to a mailbox and a real estate listing tied to Page's name. The pattern was clear: marital money in, luxury life out for months. She also requested the hotline call recording that triggered Marissa's clinic investigation. If it's his voice, he's done, Diane said. At midnight, Diane filed an emergency motion to freeze marital assets and reinstate insurance pending hearing. She attached screenshots, audit logs, and Dorsey's sworn declaration. Then she looked at Marissa, finally softening. "You're not powerless," Diane said, "but we need one final piece that ties Ethan to Larkspur directly: name, signature, or IP address. I can get it if someone inside that bank talks." Marissa's phone buzzed with a new voicemail from an unknown number. "Mrs. Reed, I work in fraud at Harbor Trust Bank, and I have the document Ethan begged us to shred." Marissa met Holly Medina in a glass-walled conference room at Harbor Trust just after sunrise. Holly looked like the kind of woman who never lost her temper because she didn't need to. She carried policy like armor. A recording device sat between them, its red light steady. "I'm in fraud investigations," Holly said. "Last night Mr. Reed called our after-hours line. He requested we destroy an accidental upload tied to Larkspur Holdings." Diane leaned forward. "And you didn't?" Holly slid a packet across the table. On top was a wire authorization form with Ethan's signature, dated 6 months ago. Beneath it, Larkspur's account opening documents listing Ethan Reed as beneficial owner. Beneath that, a supporting purpose memo: purchase of residential unit, Back Bay, followed by an internal screenshot showing the receiving account name, Page Hart. Marissa's stomach rolled. "He bought her a place with our money." Holly nodded once. "Here's the part he wanted gone." She tapped a page of system logs: IP address, device ID, login timestamps. The location field read, Reed and Ketter LLP, 14th floor, Financial District. "Every major transfer was initiated from his office network," Holly said. "Not yours, not a new device you forgot, his." Diane's pen moved fast. "Can you swear to this in court?" "I already prepared an affidavit," Holly replied, sliding it over. "And we have the recorded call." She clicked her laptop. Ethan's voice filled the room, thin and hurried. "My wife is emotional. She'll overreact. Just make it disappear." Marissa's hands clenched in her lap until her nails hurt. For weeks she'd been treated like a problem. Now his own words proved he created the problem on purpose. Diane turned to Marissa, voice firm. "You're not powerless. You were isolated, but you documented. You asked for help. You kept breathing." Holly hesitated, then added, "One more thing. The name Whitmore came up when I pulled your file. Whitmore Family Office flagged unusual activity because you're listed as a protected beneficiary on a legacy trust. They've been trying to reach you." Marissa went still. "My father." Diane didn't soften, but her eyes were kind. "He can't fix Ethan's crimes," she said. "The evidence fixes that. But he can make sure you and the baby are safe while we finish this." Marissa exhaled, shaky but clear. "Then we go to court." Diane packed the affidavit, the IP logs, and the recording, because Ethan's custody hearing was set for 9 a.m., and the judge was about to hear his lie in his own voice. Marissa sat in Diane Keats's office while rain ticked the windows. The affidavit, the IP logs, and the bank recording were stacked in a neat pile, but her hands still wanted to shake. Diane slid a cup of tea toward her. "Listen to me," she said. "You don't react anymore. You act." Marissa stared at the ring on the chain at her throat. "He wants me to look hysterical," she said. "He wants me to beg." "Then don't," Diane replied. "New rule. You sign nothing. You say nothing without counsel, and you keep your feet planted." Claire opened her laptop and pulled up Marissa's clinic portal. "I can get HR to hold the investigation until the judge hears the coercion evidence," she said. "But you'll need to be the one to authorize it." Marissa nodded once. She wasn't asking permission anymore. She wrote a short statement for her administrator. "I am the target of documented financial coercion and defamation. My attorney will provide evidence. Please preserve all hotline records." She hit send and felt a strange calm settle in her chest. Diane handed her a checklist. "Emergency orders first, then we rebuild your safety. New phone plan, new bank account, new mailing address, and a locked credit report." Each item was practical, boring, and life-saving. Marissa called the Whitmore number with Diane listening. A man answered, respectful. "Mrs. Reed, we have secured housing and a medical deposit in your name," he said. "No conditions. Your father's only request is that you and the baby are protected." Marissa's eyes stung, but she didn't crumble. "Tell him thank you," she managed, "and tell him I'm not here to punish Ethan with money. I'm here to stop him with truth." Diane smiled once. "That's the spine I need." They left the office before the sun rose fully. The courthouse steps were wet, slick, and crowded with reporters who'd caught the gala stream. Flashbulbs popped. Marissa lifted her chin and kept walking. Across the street, Ethan's black sedan idled at the curb. He stepped out, tie perfect, holding his custody petition like a weapon. Marissa tightened her grip on the file in her hand. She walked straight toward Courtroom 3, because this time she wasn't trapped on his stage. He was about to stand on hers. Diane borrowed a courthouse conference room, the kind with scuffed wood chairs and a humming fluorescent light. She set a 3-inch binder in front of Marissa and clicked open metal tabs. "This is your spine," she said. "When you feel scared, you read the tabs, not his face." Tab 1. The benefits audit trail with Ethan's user ID and the exact minute he terminated coverage. Tab 2. Ethan's email to Claire. "Cut her off. Tonight." Printed with the header data highlighted. Tab 3. Holly Medina's affidavit from Harbour Trust, plus the IP logs showing every Larkspur transfer initiated from Reed and Ketter's network. Tab 4. Dorsey's security declaration and a QR code to the archived stream clip, time-stamped and backed up. Marissa ran her fingers along the labels as if they were braille. "He can still say I'm unstable," she whispered. Diane slid Dr. Saito's letter under the last tab. "Normal prenatal care. No risk flags. That's your shield." She added a second packet. Sunridge Rehab's failed payment notices and the discharge warning. "And this," she said, voice sharpening, "is his motive. He didn't just want a divorce. He wanted you too busy to fight." Claire arrived with a garment bag and a paper cup of coffee. "You can't walk in looking like you crawled out of a storm," she told Marissa gently. "Not because you should be ashamed, but because they will use it." In the courthouse bathroom, Marissa changed into a simple charcoal suit Claire had bought off the rack, pressed and modest. She smoothed concealer under her eyes, pinned her hair into a low twist, and tucked her wedding ring, still on its chain, into the inside pocket like evidence from a crime scene. Back in the conference room, Diane practiced with her. "Yes or no first," she said, then one sentence, dates and facts, no apologies. Marissa repeated the timeline until her voice stopped shaking. The deposit demand, the insurance termination, the gala coercion, the custody filing. A knock sounded. Holly Medina stepped in, carrying her own sealed envelope. "I'm here to testify," she said. Marissa drew a long breath. The bailiff opened the courtroom door and called, "Reed versus Reed, temporary orders," and every head turned toward Marissa's file. Courtroom 3 smelled like wet wool and old paper. Ethan sat at the petitioner's table in a crisp suit, hands folded like a man who expected to be congratulated. He didn't look at Marissa's belly. He looked at the judge as if the bench belonged to him. Diane Keats stood first. "Your Honor, we're here because Mr. Reed used money, housing, and medical care as weapons," she said. "We'll prove it with timestamps, audit logs, and third-party witnesses." Ethan's attorney rose. "This is an attempt to intimidate a respected attorney." "Sit," Judge Alvarez said, flat. "I want facts." Diane clicked a tablet. Exhibit 1. The court monitor played the hotel hallway footage, Ethan's hand shoving a pen toward Marissa, his mouth forming the words, "Sign, and I'll reactivate insurance for 30 days. Marissa heard the courtroom inhale. Diane didn't pause. Exhibit 2. She held up the benefits audit trail. Mr. Reed terminated spousal coverage at 3:17 p.m. yesterday. Same user ID, same IP, same building. She handed the pages to the clerk. Claire Haskins stepped forward and swore in. "He emailed me," Claire said, voice steady. "He wrote, 'Cut her off, tonight.' I kept it because it felt wrong." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Claire, you're confused. Do not speak," Judge Alvarez warned. Then Holly Medina took the stand. She laid the bank affidavit down like a brick. "Larkspur Holdings lists Ethan Reed as beneficial owner," she testified. "Transfers were initiated from his firm's network. He called after hours asking us to destroy logs." Diane played the recording. Ethan's own voice filled the room. "My wife is emotional. Just make it disappear." The judge stared at Ethan for a long moment. "Mr. Reed," he said, "you filed for custody claiming your wife is a danger, yet you cut her insurance and tried to coerce her signature on camera. That is not protection. That is control." Ethan's attorney tried again. "Your Honor, this is sensational." "It's documented," the judge snapped. He signed the temporary orders. Assets frozen, insurance reinstated immediately, exclusive use of the home to Marissa, and a no-contact order outside legal channels. He also ordered a referral for investigation into fraud and false reporting. Marissa didn't smile. She just breathed, like her lungs finally had room. Ethan stood too fast, chair scraping. His eyes went sharp, desperate, and he leaned toward the clerk's window with a new packet in his hand. A deputy stepped in front of Marissa. "Don't leave. Mr. Reed just filed an emergency restraining order against you." The deputy handed Diane the new filing. Diane didn't even blink. "Your Honor, this was submitted after the orders were signed," she said. "It's retaliation, and it contradicts Mr. Reed's own recorded statements." Judge Alvarez scanned the first page, then looked over his glasses at Ethan. "Mr. Reed, you just accused your wife of being dangerous, while the evidence shows you cut her insurance and attempted to coerce her signature on camera." He set the papers down. "Request denied, and I'm considering sanctions for abuse of process." Ethan opened his mouth. No sound came out. Outside the courtroom, reporters crowded the hallway, but Diane guided Marissa through a side exit. Claire stayed close, one hand hovering at Marissa's elbow like a steady rail. "You did it," Claire whispered. "You didn't break." By noon, Harbor Trust confirmed the asset freeze hit every account tied to Ethan and Larkspur. Sunridge Rehab received a court-ordered payment guarantee the same afternoon, and Marissa heard her mother's voice on the phone, thin but present. "Baby," Lena said, "I'm still here." Marissa closed her eyes and let that sentence stitch something back together. The clinic placed Marissa on paid administrative leave once HR received Diane's letter and the preserved hotline records. 2 days later, the administrator called her directly. "We're sorry," he said, voice tight with embarrassment. "Your job is protected. Your benefits are active. We should have asked questions sooner." Ethan's firm did ask questions, fast. Reed and Ketter placed him on immediate suspension, and the Board of Nursing complaint he waved like a weapon became part of a fraud investigation instead. Victor Hart withdrew his public support when Holly Medina's affidavit hit the docket, and Page stopped returning Ethan's calls the same day the judge ordered attorney's fees against him. A week later, Marissa delivered a healthy baby boy under the hospital lights she knew so well. She named him Jonah Whitmore Reed. Whitmore for the family she'd kept at a distance, Reed for the chapter she survived, not the man who tried to erase her. Her father met Jonah quietly. No cameras, no speeches, just a grey-haired man holding a newborn and saying, "You don't have to be alone anymore." Marissa moved into a small, safe townhouse rental arranged through the Whitmore family office, then paid it back on her own timeline. On the first calm morning, she hung Jonah's bassinet beside the window, brewed coffee, and took her ring off the chain for the last time, setting it in a drawer, not as a wound, but as proof. If you're living this kind of fear, document early, keep one account only you control, tell one credible person, and don't sign anything under pressure. Love never requires you to become smaller to be safe. So that's the story wrapped up. And hey, are you still here with me? If you've stayed to this point, something in Marissa's fight probably touched your heart in a very real way.
Here's the life lesson I hope you carry with you.
Love should never require you to shrink to survive. When someone uses money, paperwork, or fear to control you, that isn't marriage stress, that's coercion. The way out often starts small and practical. Document early, keep one account only you control, tell one credible person, and never sign anything under pressure. And if you're healing from betrayal, remember the quiet truth behind healthy self-interest. Protecting your dignity isn't selfish, it's necessary. As the old idea goes, put on your own oxygen mask first. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you lack compassion. It means you refuse to be erased. Justice isn't always loud, but it's built on receipts, witnesses, and the courage to stand steady when the room wants you to collapse. If this story spoke to you, please share it with someone who needs strength tonight, and subscribe, so we keep building a space where truth wins and hearts heal.